Hey, Aviv, just say when you want me to kill the music.
Right, yeah, I think they must have had some wallets. Have you ever seen that I think we're good. I think we're good to go. I heard about it. I love. I mean, you did like making your own dice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You should. Open dice. So you create a DeFi track and basically trophy. Yeah, which I didn't know about. Yeah, in my opinion, if you want to you might as well just establish
Alright, well, thanks everyone for coming here. We'll give a couple more minutes to let everyone get settled. Hope everyone had a little bit of pizza and something to drink. I haven't done a talk about privacy specifically with respect to Wasabi Wallet yet. So a lot of this talk is going to be new things that I'm trying out, and I just want to sort of see what the audience response is. Privacy is a very interesting topic because it can go very, very deep, or it can be kind of at the surface shallow. It really depends on what you want to talk about and how much you know. So out of curiosity, just by show of hands, who here has thought about privacy in the context of cryptocurrency? Thought about privacy in the context of cryptocurrency. Okay, who here is familiar with privacy method in cryptocurrency? So some sort of method to achieve more privacy. Okay, by show of hands, who here thinks that if you use Bitcoin, you can achieve a pretty good amount of privacy? Just by the way that you use Bitcoin, you can achieve good privacy. Okay, awesome. And I should say as well, this is being live streamed, so there might be as many as 10 viewers that are going to be seeing you. So look your best, look your brightest. Awesome. So we'll go through it. So I'm going to be talking about how to think about privacy when it comes to Bitcoin, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Wasabi Wallet because it's a wallet that at the moment is trying very much to give the average everyday user the ability to instantly download and have network and blockchain level privacy right there at the ready. So we're going to talk about how that's done. Okay, so to start off, we cover just some basics about how Bitcoin works. Oh, my bad. Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. How Bitcoin works. So the first thing you have to understand when we talk about privacy, put all the other things you know about Bitcoin aside. The one thing I need you to understand is that there are two ways to do accounting when it comes to money. On the left, you have account-based. This is the method that you are very familiar with. In account-based models, you have a single account, and someone gives you money, and the account balance goes up. And when you want to spend money, you can spend up to the amount that you have in the account balance goes down. Intuitively, you guys all understand this. Then there's a coin-based model. This is based on what's called an unspent transaction output. So this is a bit of a weird thing to think about, but the funny thing is that you've already thought about it in this way with your cash in particular. So let's see how these things are different. So just for clarity here, Ethereum uses an account-based model. If you've ever used Ethereum, if you've done anything on Ethereum, especially if you've done many things on Ethereum, you'll notice that you have one Ethereum address. With Bitcoin, if you're using your Bitcoin wallet, you're going to have many, many, many different addresses all of the time. Okay, so how does it look like when we pay with cash? Well, let's say all you have is a 500 euro note. And by the way, I should say most of these slides are done by David Molnar, who's a lead dev at Wasabi Wallet. I'm a community tech lead at Wasabi Wallet, so that's sort of my role. But anyway, so that's why there's euros here and not Canadian dollars. So if you have a 500 euro note, you want to pay for beer, there's no way to pay in an account-based method. There's no way to take that 500 euro note and cut it into pieces to give just what the amount that's needed. If you want to spend a 500 euro note to buy beer, you need to actually get rid of the entire note. You need to give the entire note to the person and get brand new notes back. Right? This is something that you wouldn't have to do in an account-based model. So far I'm hoping we're all on the same page. So if we try to like draw out what this looks like, if Alice here wants to spend $100 to Bob, right? In this coin-based model, right, where we're focusing on the coins that we have, Alice has to take her $500 bill and actually break it, consume the entire $500 bill. Even if all she wants to do is spend $100, she needs to consume the entire 500 euro note, and she needs to actually give herself money back, okay, as change. You've probably heard this concept of change. When you use an e-transfer or an account-based model, there's never change, right? It's always exactly the amount you want to send, exactly the amount you want to receive. So this is the difference in models here. And with Bitcoin, we have the same thing. So if Alice has Bitcoin, what it really means is that Alice has an unspent coin on the Bitcoin network, right? And let's say she has 6 Bitcoins, right? If she wants to spend 2 Bitcoins, give those 2 Bitcoins to Bob, she must actually consume all 6 Bitcoins that she has. And then give the remainder to herself as change, okay? So who here is sort of familiar with this idea already? Who here has a good grasp of the UTXO model versus the account-based model? The interesting thing with this model is that originally the idea was Satoshi said, look, the way we can do privacy perfectly is what we'll do is we'll use different addresses every time. So every time you want to spend some money, you'll spend it from address number 1, but you'll make a brand new, fresh address over here on the right that isn't linked. So the outside world won't be able to tell that this is Alice and this is Alice because they're kind of this gibberish string of characters, right? That was the original idea. We're going to see how that's very flawed. So taking this a little bit further into a graph model, we can see that if Alice wants to spend 2 Bitcoin and pay that to Bob, she's going to get 4 Bitcoin in change to herself. And next time when she wants to spend a coin, she's actually referencing a previous transaction where she paid money to Bob. Okay, so there's actually a link. In math, we call it a graph, which is a bunch of circles connected with lines to other circles. That's what's going on over here. So if she wants to spend some more money this way, again, she's creating this link. And this link persists throughout. And if you've ever heard of a forensics company or something like Chainalysis or Elliptic, then you probably know that they're really good at tracing Bitcoins. And when they're tracing Bitcoins, all they're doing is they're developing clusters using various heuristics and some maybe machine learning or AI or anything like that. They're just trying to figure out whose money is where and linking all those things together. So at this point, we're going to talk about why privacy is broken. Before we talk about the problems of privacy, I want to convince you that privacy is important. What would Bitcoin be if there was no privacy in Bitcoin, right? The number one thing that proponents of Bitcoin will say is that it's censorship resistant. What that means is that one person can give money to another person, and no matter what any central bank or central party or financial institution says, those 2 people can engage in commerce, right? But there's a problem there. And the problem is that Bitcoin strives to be like cash. And cash has precisely that property. When you receive a $20 bill, right, it doesn't matter the history of that $20 bill. As long as it's not a counterfeit note, as long as it's a legitimate note, it doesn't matter if that $20 bill might have taken part in, for example, an illegal immigrant getting paid under the table for construction work, or someone buying marijuana from someone else at a university. Those things don't matter, right? Well, with Bitcoin, the problem is those things do matter, right? The problem is that if we don't have privacy, what we're fundamentally saying is we know which coins belong to who, and central institutions can decide selectively who to censor. Perhaps some coins will not be worth the same as others. So privacy is a really big problem. And there's a term we use in Bitcoin called fungibility. And fungibility is the property where if you have one Bitcoin, that is as good as any other Bitcoin. You don't need to do anything special to it. You don't need to get it recognized by anyone. If you want to spend that Bitcoin, it should be as spendable as any other Bitcoin on the network. If we don't have privacy, we can't have fungibility. At least not for those who are being censored. And if we don't have fungibility, fundamentally we won't have good money in the way that cash is considered good money. Okay, so privacy today. I spend my whole day thinking about privacy and forensics. I've worked for a forensics company with this gentleman here. We used to work together. And I like to do a lot of amateur sort of forensics by myself, where I'll go and I'll do some snooping with some Bitcoin transactions. So I'm going to show you what this would look like. So let's say this is you over here, this is me, right? Or the other way around. And all you want to do is spend some Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee. All right, very simple, straightforward. So the first point where your price might be leaked is directly with the individual you're interacting with, right? So for example, if no one in the world knows that you want to give me Bitcoin, right? I'll still know, right? Because we're the ones communicating with each other. I'm the merchant, you're the buyer, whatever it might be. So already things like your personal identity, your KYC, your know your customer policy, whether that's your ID, anything like that, that can actually put your name physically on Bitcoins, essentially. Okay, but here's the big thing. Here's something that most people don't know. If I spend $5 at 99% of Bitcoin stores, I know how much revenue they did that year. I know all of their customers. I know the frequency of their customer behavior. I know everything about what that business is doing. And the fact that a lot of people don't believe that's the case, and I assure you it really, really is, with some very, very simple heuristics, we're able to essentially cluster individuals. And so what that means is that when you are shopping somewhere online and you think, wow, I'm anonymous, I'm using these one-time address codes. Really, someone like myself with $5 of Bitcoin can find out the entire address cluster of a particular vendor, and thus be able to connect you to that vendor very quickly. So here, there's the personal identification with the individual you're interacting with. Another thing to consider is your wallet itself. This is a really big one most people don't think about. Your wallet is telling you the balance of your Bitcoins. How does your wallet know the balance of your Bitcoins? Well, if it pings a central server, what does that mean? That means you told the central server, here are all my addresses. Here's every transaction I've ever done. Please tell me my history and my balance. So who knows everything about you? Well, that wallet, right? How many wallets currently are based on this model? Pretty much all of them. Almost all of them, with the exception of, for example, running your own full node, or using Electrum with your own Electrum personal server, or maybe with Red Wallet with balloon filters, although we'll talk about that later. So wallet leaks. And not just that, but just like with the cash example, if you go to a store and you have a 500 euro note and you want to buy beer, what do you reveal to the bartender? You reveal to the bartender you have 500 euros. You might not want to reveal that to a bartender, right? Because you only want to spend 5, but you can't help yourself but to reveal that information. With Bitcoin, it's far worse, right? Not only do you reveal your current balance and the change of how much money you have left over, you practically speaking reveal 70 to 80% of your past and future transactions from then on. Okay, network analysis. This is a fun one. This is where, for example, if you're using a wallet and you're pinging a third-party server like discussed, that's where you could get attacked. So, for example, if you're using Electrum, but not with your Electrum personal server, you're actually connecting to someone's hosted, some friendly person's hosted Electrum server. That person might be recording what you're doing. Not just that, how you broadcast the transactions to the network. There may be a lot of Bitcoin nodes that are purposefully recording the IP addresses and the locations of where Bitcoin transactions come from. This is how a Bitcoin transaction, which is just ones and zeros, can have a name, can have an amount, can have a location in the world, and that can be a real problem. And of course, blockchain analysis, and that's what I've been talking mostly about. And that's really about clustering your transaction history, looking at how much money you have, and so forth. Okay, so we're gonna rush through a lot of things quickly because I really want to get to the Q&A because I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. So let's sort of brainstorm some intuitions about how, if we have a Bitcoin wallet and we have as many addresses as we want, what are some things we could do to mask our amounts, to mask how much money we have? Does anyone have any ideas? What are some ideas?
Well, I suppose you could make many addresses and move your own Bitcoin around between these addresses.
Awesome. So I kind of gave it away here, but that's sort of a really intuitive first idea. So the first thing you might think is, well, listen, if the merchant knows that this address has my Bitcoin, because I just bought some Bitcoin and that's my change, what if I just move that once or twice? Then it'll be fine. The reality is that it doesn't really work that way. Because when we cluster addresses and transactions, it's actually pretty easy to tell that you're doing this to yourself. In fact, you'll notice the graph sort of will come together as time goes on, because even though you put in a bunch of different addresses, you're still going to spend them all together, right? Potentially. And even if you don't, other things will give that away. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying to pretend like you're more than one person. And you'll maybe succeed. Maybe you'll convince someone you're two people. But that's the best you'll do. Okay? So that's sort of not really efficient. So what's another idea for anonymizing your Bitcoin?
What a Tumblr.
I was going to say yes, like getting 100 people together and all kind of swapping Bitcoin like a Tumblr.
Okay? Kind of giving away the premise of the... Your idea is too good, sir. Please. But you're exactly right. But we're gonna talk about that in a second. But the even simpler solution is a Tumblr. And people have some weird connotations like, what's a Tumblr? What's a mixer? All a Tumblr is, it's like a VPN. It is a payment forwarding system. So you go online, you find some website that says, we're going to send Bitcoins to whoever you want. You just give us the Bitcoins up front. And you send them Bitcoins and you hope they don't run away with your money. So what's the reality with Tumblrs? Well, you have to trust them entirely. There's no way to know if they're going to rip you off. They're going to take away all your money. There's no way to know if they aren't logging your behavior. And what's worse is that almost all Tumblrs have very quickly and very easily been de-anonymized. So unfortunately, Tumblrs, they don't work, we would assume. But the nice thing with Tumblr is at least you're already beginning to hide among other people. Right? Fundamentally, that's what you're doing. So centralized mixers. Here we have Alice sending some coins to the mixer and then getting a coin back. And the coin she's going to get back, if you look at the blockchain, it won't be the same coin she put in. That's an obvious mistake a Tumblr probably wouldn't make, otherwise they'd go out of business. It's probably going to be Bob's coin when Bob puts in some coin expecting some coins back. Essentially, it's just a fancy way of users switching coins amongst each other. So now we're going to introduce another idea, because really the biggest heuristic that's going to be used to cluster your addresses is this idea of common input ownership. So when users do a Bitcoin transaction, 99% of the time, or practically all the time, right, all the people on the left are the same individual. So it's the same as me saying, if you reach into your wallet and you make a purchase, all those coins belong to you, right? That wouldn't make sense that we see transactions which have 10 different people in them when wallets only worry about you. One person, one wallet, right? So the first way we can break this is with an idea that's quite simple. It's called a CoinJoin. And the idea is this. We'll have multiple individuals come together, make a single transaction. And the way they'll do it is they'll fill in the left side and the right side, and they'll essentially give money to themselves. Okay? And the idea here is that by taking money from these four and moving them over here, on the blockchain, you have four histories that have converged together, and you're not really sure which Bitcoin over here corresponds to which Bitcoin over there. Now, it's a bit of a tricky process doing this, because what they need to do is they need to share all of the input addresses and all of the output addresses amongst each other in a way where they don't reveal or leak privacy to each other. Well, let's say they do that, and then finally they need to sign the transaction one at a time, all four of them. One for each coin they have over here. But there's a problem. The problem here is that you can still break this pretty trivially. You look at this and say, well, there's 8 Bitcoin over here, and there's 1 Bitcoin over there. It looks like this 1 Bitcoin is likely Alice's 1 Bitcoin, because Alice needs at least 1 Bitcoin to get her fair amount. There's no other way for Alice to get a total of 1 Bitcoin without consuming the entire 1 Bitcoin. So that's Alice, okay? And the next step is, well, there's no way for anyone else in this list to have these 8 Bitcoins, because these 2 individuals both have less. So we can de-anonymize that. And lastly, we can figure out, well, actually, Esther has this 7 Bitcoin, and this has this, and Bob has those. And quickly, we've done something called a CoinJoin Sudoku. It's a very simple, intuitive puzzle where you try to combine all the individuals on the left and the right and figure out where money's moving. And unfortunately, this appears, to a forensics company, this appears as actually 4 distinct transactions that aren't anonymous. So this does almost nothing. So we introduce a new idea. Well, it's not that new. It's since 2013. It's called equal output CoinJoin, excuse me. There we go. So the idea here is the same. But instead of giving ourselves Bitcoin in the same amount or slightly different amount, what if we agree that all participants will get the same Bitcoin amount at the end? So over here, all 4 of those individuals are getting 1 Bitcoin at the top, and all 4 individuals are going to have some change, with the exception of Alice, because she only has 1 Bitcoin, so she's already been paid for. And by doing something like this, we essentially say, look, you don't know which of these 4 individuals owns the Bitcoin, right? And we introduced a concept called the anonymity set, okay? And the anonymity set is this idea that you are hiding in a crowd, right? And when you use your regular debit card, right, apart from the bank and the person you interact with, nobody knows what happened, right? Like who sent money to who, right? That is very private information. So a good anonymity set, the anonymity set that most of the people in this room appreciate, is in the millions, right? You are just like any of the millions of other people. Your information isn't unique or special. And so here we're trying to get that same idea of getting that anonymity set as high as possible. Okay, so how does Wasabi do it? Well, it's a tricky problem because it turns out you have to have these participants, they have to coordinate with each other, and they have to do all this complicated things of signing transactions and getting the right amounts and all that. At the same time, you don't want anyone to trust anyone else. How are we going to do that? Well, here's how it's done. Wasabi wallets are desktop wallets that you can download, and every instance is automatically connecting to the coordinator. The coordinator is run by the ZK Snacks company that makes the Wasabi wallet. All Wasabi wallets are connected to that coordinator over Tor. Okay? That coordinator's objective is to build coinjoins among participants that have the wallet, and then get all participants to sign, and then broadcast that final transaction. The goal of the Wasabi wallet is to have a wallet that completely automatically lets you engage in these coinjoins with money that you have, essentially delinking your past history and your future history. I'm going to walk you through how it's done in a trustless way. So the first thing that all participants need to do is they need to go to the coordinator and say, here's the Bitcoin I have. For example, Alice says I have 5 Bitcoin, right? Alice needs to give an output for change and an output for the clean coins, the coins that are mixed. The problem is, if we trust the coordinator, right, that's the same issue with the centralized mixers. We don't want the coordinator to know that Alice's mixed coin is in that particular address, right? It's still better than nothing, right? That only the coordinator knows, but it's a point of weakness, it's a point of failure. So what's going to happen is we're going to use a little trick here. Alice is going to give a blinded address. A blinded address is an address that you can imagine is like a white piece of paper in a black envelope. And she gives the black envelope to the coordinator, and the coordinator signs it with a Sharpie. And the signature sort of seeps through the envelope. The coordinator doesn't know the address that Alice is providing, but the coordinator can still sign it because the coordinator knows that Alice has the correct amount of Bitcoins in place. And so the coordinator says, you're good to participate. Here's a signature for the output, the address. And now we can get through the process. So the entire CoinJoin process goes into a few phases. We'll go through here. Firstly, peers who are using the Wasabi wallet right now at this very moment are essentially registering their coins. And there's essentially a room, an online room, of these people that are waiting for the next round of CoinJoins to happen. And currently, that room is set to about 100 participants. That's the goal, 100 participants. And so at first, everyone's waiting for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're declaring their inputs. Just the same way if you're on an online game and you're waiting for others to participate, it's the same sort of idea. Once the connection is confirmed, people register their outputs. And so we just go back one step here. Once all the peers are ready to go and the time for the CoinJoin is started, all the outputs now have to be registered. This is a bit tricky, and we'll see if we get to, yeah. This is a bit tricky because you don't want to know where the unblinded output comes from. So what's going to happen now is that at the very last stage before before that CoinJoin is constructed, you're going to have a bunch of outputs coming in that are unblinded. So all these participants are taking their black envelopes, they're opening them, and they're sending to the coordinator the signature that the coordinator put, as well as their own address. But we want to mask the fact that that individual is sending that address. Do you have a question? No? And then the last stage is signing, right? Now, a lot of this, it's quite technical and I'm moving quickly. That's why I'm going to leave as much time for Q&A as possible. But the idea here is that all participants are participating with the coordinator in a trustless way. That's a very fundamental principle. The idea here is that the coordinator cannot hurt the individuals, and the individuals cannot hurt the coordinator.
Is this using snarks?
No, that's actually a really good question, but no. So snarks are a type of zero knowledge proof.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we don't use snarks here, although it's no, we don't use snarks. But the idea is very similar. Yeah. Everything with Wasabi is done over Tor. Has anyone heard of the Tor network? Tor? Just show of hands, Tor. Yeah. So the idea of Tor, again, is just that you're trying to mask your IP address. That's part of the network level privacy that Wasabi guarantees to, or is trying to guarantee to its users. So all connections over the internet are through Tor to the coordinator. So in this process here, when the outputs are being registered, right, each Wasabi client will destroy a Tor bridge and create a brand new Tor bridge at the very moment that the output registration phase happens. It's about a 20-second window. The idea here is so that the Wasabi coordinator can't do a timing analysis of individuals and when they heard an unblinded address come in. And then there's the signing part. And this is very interesting because what essentially is going on is your wallet registered a coin. So for example, this is your coin right here. You gave Wasabi a blinded output and then an unblinded output. And then at the last stage, you unblinded the output, and Wasabi, the coordinator, is going to fill in all the amounts. So all of the amounts, who owes how much to whom, all that is done by the coordinator. So the question is, well, couldn't the coordinator cheat you? The answer is no. Because the last stage requires that this unsigned transaction that's completely done is given to all participants. And all participants must sign. If a single participant doesn't sign, the CoinJoin doesn't happen. Right? So every participant, when they get that unsigned transaction, they can look at it themselves and say, yes, I know this is my address, and I alone know that this is my address, and that this is my address. And I can do the math, and I'm not being screwed over here. Does that kind of make sense? I lost about half of you, I can tell. Which, we're going to get to Q&A. I think the Q&A is like right now. So I just want to do a quick summary here. The idea that we're trying to do is no trust assumption. So when you use the Wasabi wallet on your desktop, the coordinator cannot steal from you when you're doing these CoinJoins. The coordinator cannot reveal your identity. The coordinator doesn't know anything about you more than anyone else in the world, or almost that little, right? So the coordinator does not have any additional privileges. This means that you don't have to trust the coordinator. You weren't saying, hoping, oh, I hope this coordinator doesn't release my private information. This is a problem in privacy. For example, if you used a VPN before, you know, or you might know, that VPNs are kind of a privacy problem because we can't really know if the person that's providing you that VPN service is tracking your behavior. If they're tracking your behavior, they might be selling that behavior, right? And in the event that you're using a VPN, for example, right now, if you're in Hong Kong, you might be using a VPN, right, or Tor, right? If you're anywhere in China ever, you're probably using VPN or Tor, or in Venezuela or wherever you are. You might be at risk if the government wants to go and pay these VPN providers for that information. And lastly, the coordinator can't see your balance. So I think that's important as well. There's some other summary points here, but I want to cover, because we're at the Q&A now. And I'm just going to cover a couple of things before we get there. So is CoinJoin legal? This is a pretty good question, because I can tell you now that most mixers are not legal. Most mixers are not legal. The reason why they're not legal is because a mixing service is essentially a money service business. It takes your Bitcoin, and then it gives Bitcoin to you later. It's like a bank or an exchange. And as you know, exchanges are going to ask all sorts of information from you, right? So if a mixer is actually trying to be private, they're illegal. And if they're not trying to be private, they're bad at being private, right? So there's no way for a mixer, a centralized mixer, to actually do this right. Wasabi isn't like that. Wasabi never holds your coins. Wasabi constructs CoinJoins from participants themselves. The beauty here is that it makes Wasabi a software and a software alone. and it means it's not illegal. So everything about Wasabi, the company, the people that work there, everything is open source, everything is available to the public, and there are terms and conditions and legal paperwork and all that, but coinjoins aren't illegal. And a really big thing I want to stress today to all of you here is that privacy shouldn't be something that only criminals ask for. Privacy should be something that only people that need it right immediately now should be asking for it. You should demand your privacy, right? Really big thing is, you know, if you ever give me $1 of your Bitcoin and you aren't using smart tools, I'll know everything about you, right? And you might think, well, Aviv, you know, you're smart. You've been in this for a little while, right? Maybe you know, but someone else doesn't. The reality is that forensics companies are providing easy-to-use tools that are getting cheaper by the day. Some of these tools are free, right? Which means all it's going to take is someone to spend maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes to break your privacy. Do you really want to have your entire net worth of Bitcoin, for example, to be jeopardized by any time you spend $5 with anyone? Right? That's how you should be thinking about this problem. And lastly, I want to say that recently, the CoinJoin bounty, which was started in 2013, Gregory Maxwell invented the concept of the CoinJoin and formalized it. In 2013, 46 Bitcoin were stacked inside this multi-sig wallet that was designed to incentivize any wallets out there to create good CoinJoins that do proper trustless solutions. And for the first time in 6 years, 2 projects won that award. The first is Join Market, and the second is Wasabi Wallet. So it's a really, really big deal. I think both teams won 10 Bitcoin each. And yes, and I'll say this, the team that made Wasabi Wallet possible, really it's these guys here. So it's Adam from ZK Snacks. He's a CTO. He's been in Bitcoin for many, many years. He's a hardcore privacy advocate. These gentlemen here are the legal team that make Wasabi run. And we have Lucas, who's an amazing dev, as well as David, whose picture is in here. So I think that's pretty much it. And before I sort of talk more, I'll just sort of open it up to questions.
I have lots of questions.
Great.
One at a time?
One at a time, or 3 at once.
Can you maybe cover the cost of the contract?
Excellent, thank you, because I was going to say that, but now that you asked, it makes it so much easier. So, how does Wasabi make money? How does Wasabi work? This is something that makes me incredibly proud, because it's very rare that we have really good Bitcoin services where there's actually a smart way to make profit from it in a sustainable way. The cool thing about the Wasabi CoinJoin is the coordinator collects a fee, okay? The fee from the users. The fee is 0.3% maximum is the idea, 0.3%. That's if a CoinJoin has 100 participants. If a CoinJoin has half that number of participants, the fee will be less. There are some things about the fee that are still not 100% worked out. The fee is not always the same, because sometimes the network fees, like the mining fees, go up, and those are sort of levied on all the users. But for the most part, what's expected is about 0.25%, 0.3% to mix coins. For perspective, centralized mixers today charge between 1% and 5%. 1 to 3% is typical what you'll see. So Wasabi did a great job of undercutting the market by about tenfold. What's also cool is that Wasabi has been around for 1 year. A month ago, we did the first ever 100-person CoinJoin. It's never been done in the history of Bitcoin. I was very proud to tweet about that. And we, at this point of the year, Wasabi has made in revenue 55 Bitcoin in 1 year. So a project that is promoting privacy and making privacy readily available to everyone in an open source, trustless way is earning money from its participants without having to ask the participants for anything. This is pretty cool. I think it might be one of the few examples where software alone is making money, and these people who create the software don't know anything about the users that are downloading. Yes?
So 100 participants, this is new, allowing for that fact. How long does something like that take? And 99 of them sign, 1 doesn't sign, what happens?
Okay, great. That's good questions. 2 questions there. The first thing is, how long does it take? So I recently was very happy to find out that a privacy paper of mine about Wasabi and how it works and how anonymous is it really got accepted for scaling Bitcoin in Tel Aviv. So I'll be answering those questions super in depth at that point, but I'll answer it now. So Wasabi does about 18 coin joins per day. The median number of participants is about 50 or 60. I believe the average might be a little bit higher, but that's pretty much what you're looking at. So if you say to yourself, I have 1 Bitcoin, how long is it going to take for my 1 Bitcoin to go through Wasabi? The answer is about 24 hours is roughly what I give. Maybe 12 to 24 hours depending on how things go. When a Wasabi CoinJoin happens, the equal denominations are of 0.1 Bitcoin amounts. So typically users show up with 0.3, 0.7, 0.5, 1.8 Bitcoin, and every time a CoinJoin is happening, they're getting 0.1 Bitcoin output amounts. They're also getting higher denominations with lower anonymity sets, but we won't go there. The second question was about what's called denial of service attack. The idea here is, can Wasabi get broken? This is actually almost as important as how do we protect users from Wasabi, is how do we protect the system from the users, right? It's kind of the way Bitcoin works, right? We were always thinking about both sides. And the answer is yes, users can show up and not sign. But the wonderful thing is that the coordinator knows which coin didn't sign, right? Because as the coordinator is getting signatures, all the different coins are coming in. And what will happen is if a particular coin doesn't sign, the coordinator will ban that coin for just a few hours and then redo it right away. So if there's 99 participants and 1 person didn't sign, the coordinator can spot that and then rerun it one more time with 98. Typically what happens is users complain, why was my coin banned? And the answer is your Tor circuit broke, or your Wi-Fi went out for 5 seconds at just the worst moment. And it wasn't your fault, and no loss, like you have to wait a little bit longer, but that's how we prevent that attack. It's a really great question. Yes?
Is there any way, like if, let's say, a certain amount of the participants breaking a Tor exit node, like a certain amount of participants get in together and say, okay, this is the amount that I had, this is the amount that I had, that the anonymity could be broken?
You're saying if enough participants, are you talking Tor specifically or the CoinJoin specifically?
The CoinJoin specifically.
Right, so another attack vector you can consider is what if, out of the 100 participants, 97 of them are one forensics company, right? Because we don't know who's using the service, right? So it could be all forensics companies for all we know. That would also be a problem, right? That's the reason why you can't use a CoinJoin system that doesn't have a really large anonymity set, because the topic of my paper for scaling Bitcoin is what is the actual anonymity set? How many users are making mistakes and hurting the anonymity set of others? If you're hiding among 100 people and 5 of those individuals aren't smart and they give up all their information, you're no longer hiding among 100 people, you're hiding among 95. So the anonymity set can be reduced in a dozen ways, right? And that's why it needs to be large, right? It's also why Wasabi is really pushing for free remixing. This is an idea that the devs have tried in different ways, and there are some other ideas floating around about how to do it perfectly. The idea of allowing users to participate in a single CoinJoin, and then a week later, when they want to spend their money, they can do another CoinJoin right then, right? This allows a person not even to really know when that individual started doing Wasabi CoinJoins, like when they entered. And that kind of makes that anonymity set much bigger.
Is there a mechanism that you use to make sure that like 95 of those aren't the same person?
We do forensics, we write papers, and we go to conferences and get peer review, and then people make fun of us, and then we go to the drawing board, and then we try harder. That's how we do it. So really what we're doing is you can tell when, for example, one user has 100 Bitcoin and then breaks it into like many different coins, and then runs multiple Wasabi instances. That's not very healthy because you're acting as 20 participants when you're really one. We can see that, and so part of my paper is essentially saying how many people did that, and saying out of 100 people, what number did that. And the results are still really preliminary, so I don't want to say too much, but I would say conservatively 25% of individuals are not doing things right. Yes.
UAML rules as product recommendations. UAML rules and product recommendations. So things are coming to play in Canada. For example, if you take custody of other people's assets, right, you could become a virtual currency dealer. At some point down the road, the travel rule will come where different kind of bodies or entities that take custody of assets will have to sort of take certain information from users. I'm just wondering how you comply, or how maybe you, or bad word, but you know what I mean? Like, how can users use this
How do we
service
undermine
with
that
bad,
word?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
To, like,
absolutely.
the privacy,
No, it's okay.
you know, people want
I like to
Yeah.
undermine. But the reality is what you said is when we hold people's money,
Yeah.
right, then we become a virtual currency dealer.
Yeah.
So your question was, just for the stream and everyone here, you know, what about the legal ramifications of doing the Wasabi CoinJoins? Aren't you a money service business? Should you be collecting AML KYC? The answer is we're not. At least up until now, the American government and most European governments have not said anything about services like this. Essentially what this is similar to any wallet that you would download off the Play Store. That's just a standalone wallet that isn't, for example, like Coinbase, which is an exchange, that doesn't have custody. Right? Anyone can build a wallet, it's just a piece of software. That's not a money service business. Money service business is an individual who holds people's money on someone else's behalf and has responsibilities to that individual, right? As well as to the financial regulations. So that pretty much answers the question. At least for now, we don't have any regulations to deal with.
I want to go back to kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
the question. You kind of mentioned it quick, and I think it's important to just mention more broadly. As far as hurting the anonymity set goes, it's not just some snoop company you're eating up the whole anonymity set, but also even genuine users, the way they treat their use exos post-mix is important.
Excellent. So this is one of the biggest heuristics that we're using to de-anonymize our own users. The way that you have to think about privacy, right? We're building tools of privacy to protect people who are looking for financial asylum. There are a lot of different philosophies about what Bitcoin is used for, and maybe this is controversial, but my opinion is that Bitcoin is financial asylum. When we say Bitcoin works and it's censorship resistant, we're making a promise to users. Those users might be, for example, like a journalist or a dissident. For example, I was at Bitcoin 2019 in San Francisco 2 months ago. Edward Snowden spoke on video. He admitted that the way that he got the documents needed to reveal all those leaks was by using Bitcoin to pay for a server space. He admitted that publicly. So we have to understand that when we're building Bitcoin privacy tools, that's who we're trying to protect. And the only way to protect them is to attack the very tools we build, right? Because everyone's always attacking our tools, but the enemy will be silent about it, right? I mean, a lot of forensics companies will publish papers and explain how they do their work, but at the end of the day, we have to be better than forensics companies, and we have to de-anonymize our own users and let them know. For example, if Wasabi is mixing in these 0.1 output denominations, right? It's kind of like you show up with a $500 bill, and Wasabi makes you these $10 bills, these $10 clean bills, right? So now you have a $500 bill over here, and you have this pile of $10 bills that are all, no history. There's no relationship. And then you say, I'm going to take all 500 and spend them in one location. What's the problem there? The problem there is that now we already know quite a bit about you, because we know that you participated in this CoinJoin, and this CoinJoin, and this CoinJoin, and this CoinJoin. We know that you have at least $500. A lot of participants might have less. It might be the case that 80% of participants have only $100, right? And so you now narrowed yourself into a much smaller pool. So yes, things like that are a really great point, and it's a big topic. Yes, Victor?
Back to the denial of service attack, I'm curious. It sounded like if even one participant doesn't sign, the whole transaction can't come through.
Yes.
And that happens all the time because users just mix up whether there's a Tor browser connection issue or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell whether those are actually attacks or just user fuck-ups.
Impossible to tell, yeah.
Right. And so the question is, wouldn't it be relatively simple for a coordinated attack to just essentially shut down Wasabi forever? Because you can have participants in every round fuck up on purpose, and if they're just banned for a couple of hours, you just need a certain amount of users to essentially cripple the system.
Excellent. So what Wasabi is like Bitcoin in that if you start poking it in one way, there's just going to be like immediate changes that need to be made. So for example, let's say someone wanted to do that coordinated attack. We haven't seen that. We've seen hiccups, but we haven't seen a real coordinated attack. In that case, we would have to ban coins for weeks instead of hours, right? The problem with banning a coin for a week is that we don't know if we're banning a bad actor or a good actor that needs privacy. And not giving the person the right to privacy is a very scary thing to be doing. So in that case, for example, my intuition would be extend the period of time that a coin is banned, for example.
Well, it just increases the set of people needing to do the coordinated attack, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Or do you mean, yes.
What would be best practices for using this? Like, you put coins in from another wallet, or do you take them out?
Great question. More practical, down to earth.
Yeah.
So we're up here. Need to get down here for a bit. I like it. So practical way to use it. This is the nice part for people in the audience that aren't super tech savvy. It shouldn't be that complicated. I don't want to de-anonymize myself here too much, but this is just an instance that I have. So you download the Wasabi wallet. This is what it looks like. It looks a bit scary and confusing, a lot of tabs, but really what's happening is you're going to go over here to your receive tab. Firstly, you're going to have to write down your 12 words. You're going to have to write down your password. Those are your private keys, and only you have them, right? Wasabi doesn't have them. So you're going to go to the receive tab over here, and you're going to add a label and generate a new address. Now you might notice that there's all these like these pound signs or hashtag signs or whatever you want to call them up here. That's just what Adam calls lurking wife mode, which is not good for human resources, but that's what he calls it. So I have lurking wife mode on, right? But I can take it off to show you just like this. And I just gave a few examples up here, right? This is funny. There was a scammer that was annoying us here at D-Control, and so I tried to get the scammer to give me his money because I saw someone on CBC did this just recently. I failed. I couldn't scan the scammer, which is so upsetting. But every time you want to request money from someone, you're asked to put a label. This is really smart because when you go to your history field, right, coins that come in from that location will be labeled for you. So you can actually look at your wallet, and every single bill that hasn't been mixed, and that's mixed afterwards, you can see very clearly. In fact, in my wallet, all I have, unfortunately, is just a mixed amount. So I have 0.1 mixed amount, and it just says right there with the label 0 means mixed coin. But the change of that will have a big red shield right next to it. It'll say anonymity set of 0, whereas this one here will say, anonymity set of 203. I have to mix this afterwards, guys. It's live stream. I made a big mistake. But there you go. So you receive coins. Once they're confirmed, you select them like this. You enter your password, and it lets you register them. And you'll see a little queued sign right there. And then you wait as this thing goes down to 0. And right now, a CoinJoin just happened, which is why we're waiting for an hour and a half. As it comes close to the end of the time, you'll get to about 80, 90 participants.
Is it an amount or one coin?
That's 0.1 coin.
No, but is it one UTXO or like?
It's one UTXO, exactly.
Like if there was more than one, it would show them all.
Exactly. So the nice thing is that when you go to the send tab, you have this amazing ability to select which coins in your wallet you want to spend. You can see the histories, right? Is this a mixed coin? Is this a coin that I got from my boss at work? Is this a coin that's a lot of money? Is it a little bit of money? And as you spend, right, the coin has that history written in it for you, so that you can actually see, like, oh my goodness, this coin is the change from the time that I bought that airplane ticket, which was the change from the time I did this, which was the salary for my boss. And you realize, man, that coin has 3 histories that you've sort of lumped together. Yes?
And go over the major do-nots of using the software. For example, consolidating a UTXO instead after.
What would I do without good questions? Awesome. Okay. The major do's and don'ts. Some basic ones. Number 1, write down your passphrase and your words. Okay, very important. First thing you do. Number 2 is practice good labeling. Good labeling is something super, super fundamental to privacy. It's going to help you not make those mistakes, because you'll see those things. Number 3, CoinJoin. Be patient. Let your coins run through. And some basic, things. For example, you should only spend clean coins when you want to do something that's private, where that transaction is anonymous. Another really, really big thing is if you want to look up on the transaction status of anything related to your wallet, you have 2 options. The first is look at it in Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi Wallet uses a very clever way of essentially telling you how much money you have without anyone knowing. Is anyone familiar with block filters? Yeah, I'm worried that getting into BIP 158 and block filters and why they're really good might be a bit too much, but definitely use that. The alternative, go to blockstream.info, which is a block explorer, and get the onion link and use a Tor browser. So the biggest mistakes people make aren't even with on-chain things. people go in their Chrome browser, they go on btc.com or blockchain.com or blockchain.info, and they just dump all their addresses. Or, worst case, they dump their extended public key. That's the master address. That tells everything. And they think, oh man, I'm getting all this information, it's so great. And what they don't realize is that that company just made $20 from you, because that's how much they're going to make from selling that information to a forensics company. So you're screwed. So as much as possible, if you want to check your balance, do it here. One thing I forgot to say, which is really big, which kind of goes to this point, is you can use your Ledger and Trezor wallet with Wasabi, right? And the BEC32 addresses are there by default, which is really great.
Forgot the best way to check your own balance.
What's the best way?
Run your own
node. Thank you. Yeah. Occasionally I have to remember that there are people that still run your own node. People. Thank you. But Wasabi at least tries its best. So if you run your own node, it's even more private from the perspective of your Wasabi wallet, because Wasabi wallet will automatically point to your own Bitcoin node, which is really, really smart. But a quick summary of how Wasabi finds out your balance, like your client, how it knows about your balance. The coordinator gives all of its users filters that describe what's happening in every block. Those filters are the same for every block. For example, block 1, 2, and 3, these addresses were affected, maybe the first few letters of the address. You get the filters, you look, and you say, are any of these addresses mine? If they are, you ask a Bitcoin node over Tor for that one block, and you download the entire block instead of asking for a specific transaction. That's how you efficiently get information about your wallet.
Does Wasabi establish a new Tor circuit for every block that's requested?
Yes, it does, because we're hardcore. Yeah, also establishing a new Tor circuit every time you send a transaction. So you send a transaction, cuts that Tor circuit immediately after you're done, and then the next transaction is a new Tor circuit. Some people are like, wait, what's going on? And I apologize.
So the coordinator is basically a protocol integrated into the client wallet software.
The coordinator is also open source, but it's server-side infrastructure that isn't with the client.
So is it hosted on a central server somewhere?
Correct. It is completely centralized.
Okay.
And the idea here is that even though it's a central server, that we know where it is, and that even the NSA could know where it is, the protocol is built that it doesn't matter. All of this protocol is designed that at any point of interception, there's no privacy being linked. And it's a pretty big deal, because almost good privacy is such a buzzkill. And the reason why it's such a buzzkill is because it's great privacy until it's broken. And remember this, Bitcoin blockchain, despite all the positive things that are said, the worst part of Bitcoin is the blockchain. The worst part of Bitcoin is that all the transaction histories are stored. That's an accident. That's an unfortunate part of the Bitcoin system. And if someone can de-anonymize you in 5 years, they'll still have the transactions you did today, right? So it's important to not make privacy mistakes that you think will be okay for this month or a year, because blockchain is there forever.
You mentioned hardware wallets, so what about multi-sig, like with different hardware wallets? Does it support it yet?
Multi-sig, we support you can build your own transaction. And I'm not entirely sure if that allows for multi-sig, so I don't think you can use multi-sig viewing of balance in the wallet. But by the way, I should clarify, hardware wallets, there's a great Russian gentleman, his name is Stefan Stigarev, and he's working on hardware wallets being able to do coinjoins. But hardware wallets today can't. And the reason kind of makes sense, because the coinjoin process, right, it's an interactive process. You leave your computer running, and it's mixing over time, right? But the private keys on your wallet are actually signing transactions, even while you sleep. You wake up, and all your coins are clean. With a hardware wallet, the idea of a hardware wallet is the private keys are separate, right? And so Stefan is actually, I thought it was impossible to do hardware wallets with coinjoins, but he says it's very possible, and he's going to get it done. So it's pretty cool to see what he's working on.
So as it is, if you use a hardware wallet to create a wallet, then you can't do it. The CoinJoin is not available.
No. So with a hardware wallet, so what most people use today is they'll plug in a hardware wallet and they'll make a bunch of brand new addresses. And I recommend making a new passphrase on your hardware wallet if you can. And what they'll do is they'll first mix their coins. Like they'll take all their coins off Coinbase or wherever it's hiding, and they'll mix it properly, and then they'll send 0.1 Bitcoin at a time to individual unique addresses on their ledger device. That's pretty much the best way to do it. Merging a lot of coins is a bad idea. You can merge 1, 2, or 3, it's probably okay. Merging more than that can be quite, quickly narrows you down. Okay? And the same thing with spending, right? If you want to spend, 0.2 Bitcoin, don't reveal to the world that you have more than 0.2 Bitcoin. Right? Just spend 2 coins. You don't need to spend more. More questions?
Will the wallet actually warrant, a naive user, hey, you're trying to join too many UTXOs, so this is unwise? Or?
Oh man, that's a great idea. I like it. Yeah, unfortunately, right now there are a few things in place that warrant a user, but it could be better. It could be more, right? Adam is the CTO. He's definitely crazy. He cares about privacy more than he cares about a lot of things. His vision long term is that every Wasabi wallet is like a small forensics company, right? Is that it has everything in place that you actually know what's going on with your coin. If someone sends you money, you can spy on them and make sure that they have good privacy. So he wants to have it, not just some helpful hints. He wants quite a lot going on. Other questions?
So when the collectors broadcast a transaction, how do they know that they're getting sent to trusted nodes, or are they just broadcasting to any nodes?
Ooh, good question. So when I want to spend money from my Wasabi wallet, how do I know it's being broadcasted to a trusted node?
Well, the collectors broadcast to nodes, right? Like they broadcast.
Oh, you mean the coordinator?
Yeah, coordinator.
Right. The coordinator broadcasts to its own local node.
Okay. Right?
Because there's no point in hiding where that CoinJoin comes from. Everyone knows that's a Wasabi CoinJoin. That's kind of public information. But when you do a transaction, you find a random node over Tor. So it doesn't matter if the node is spying on you, because you're hiding your IP address. And if it doesn't broadcast successfully, you can just try again to another node. Great question.
Where do you see future optimizations, for example, or is this going to work well more, or going to splice and splice out? Do you see that?
Yeah, so Schnorr signature aggregation is a big one, because right now, an unfortunate part of CoinJoins is they take up blockchain space. They take up block space. And, Schnorr signatures allow all the signatures on the left-hand side of a transaction to be aggregated into one signature. This would cut the cost of CoinJoins by about 50 to 70%, 50 to 60%, 40 to 60%. So it's not that, probably over half. So, when network fees get higher, this would be a huge, huge help. Although network fees have been very good for like a year and a half, or maybe almost 2 years. And right now, the fees charged by the coordinator is usually like 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more than the miner fees. So it's quite optimized. And all addresses are Bech32 addresses, which is also good. Yeah?
As follow, do you know if anyone's working on splicing in and out lightning? So onboard, offboard lightning, while you're using this.
Okay, so most important thing before I forget, and I can see Taylor look at me, Lightning is the future. It's very important. Lightning has, I used to be very excited about Lightning, then I lost interest, and then I got all my interest back quite recently, because Lightning can save you in terms of privacy like nothing else. The reason why is because when you open the channel and you do transactions, those transactions aren't being broadcasted and permanently recorded. Okay? Those transactions are temporal, and that's a huge benefit. They're onion routed, so it breaks the graph, all that. So the question is Wasabi going to have Lightning, right? Adam will never say no to anything you say. So the answer is yes to everything. The question is how long and when. And the wonderful thing is that this company makes money. Like every day, users get privacy, and it just funds the project, and Adam just pours it on developers, and it's amazing. It's great.
Could somebody set up a competing coordinator and sort of undercut you?
Oh, that's a good question. So if everything's open source, let's just reboot it. Wasabi 2.0, now with Tron integration, and we'll charge less. The reality is that you could totally do this, right? The problem is that it's not even so much the software as it is the network effect, right? So the next thing you have to do is convince a bunch of other people to use that service as opposed to the original service. Then, as improvements are happening over time, you have to keep up with the main Wasabi wallet that's having improvements. You have to make sure that you're sort of taking on all those improvements. it could happen, and I don't think it will. In part because the sort of dedication, like a lot of these ideas were worked on for 4 or 5 years before a cent was made, right? So it's really not about the money here. And like I said, it's already undercut centralized mixers by tenfold. But maybe it will happen. Yes?
Kind of pick up on that idea of collaboration. You know, is Blockstream with Liquid, you can talk about Lightning. Is this starting to plug in? Is that like a collaborative thing that's taking place?
That's a really great question. Liquid, I like to call it Bitcoin's Ethereum network, because it's pretty much what Ethereum is just Liquid, essentially. But Liquid's huge because it allows us to do confidential transactions. It allows us to do things that aren't recorded necessarily on a blockchain. I think that the Liquid blockchain probably dies at one point and reboots or whatever, or even if it is kept, it has confidential transactions. The worst, there are two things in privacy that are hard to do, right? Like, good privacy requires private amounts, the amount of money you're sending to the person, and then the participants need to be anonymous. So there's private amounts and anonymous participants, right? This system is really doing the anonymous participants, but the private amounts isn't really done, because you can't do that on Bitcoin. Confidential transactions eventually will come to Bitcoin, and then we can hide amounts and it'll make things much easier. But for now, Liquid Blockstream is a great opportunity. I don't know if Wasabi will do anything with that, but that could be really cool. There needs to be a trustless and censorship-free way to get Bitcoin in and out of Liquid for that to happen. Other questions? Yes?
So I guess as somebody, you said you like work around this, people all the time. For like your average Bitcoin user, what's the best thing they can do tomorrow to improve their privacy in your opinion?
Yeah, the best thing they can do tomorrow is, number one, stop posting on Facebook how much Bitcoin you have. Start there. Stop, like...
I thought higher of the average Bitcoin
yeah,
user,
but the average Bitcoin is so excited. They're like, look at me, I just, spent, they're videotaping themselves buying stuff, and it's like, dude, why you gotta put it on YouTube and Facebook? But really, it's be mindful. I have a bias here. I think that the Wasabi wallet is probably the best wallet right now, apart from running your own Bitcoin full node. There's only one exception, is that you have to run your Bitcoin node and use Tor to broadcast. Other than that, Bitcoin full node is great, I think, privacy-wise. But Wasabi wallet is probably the best, I think. Another good alternative is Bitcoin Core full node or Electrum with Electrum personal server that you run yourself. When you go on Reddit, when you ask questions, when you go online, when you go on Telegram and you ask me questions, just know, like, I'm a forensics guy, okay? Stop telling me information. I had a guy who asked me questions, and he revealed a couple of small things. And I just wrote like a 3-page paper back about his entire life. I knew which university he went to. I knew why he needs Bitcoin. I knew that he was, I knew a lot about this guy because his Reddit account was also on other subreddits, and that's public information. He was asking questions, and he was showing me transactions and addresses. So as much as possible, be mindful. The best thing you can do as a person who doesn't know much, keep everything to your computer, your Wasabi wallet, locally. Occasionally, you can use the Tor browser to double check when something on your Wasabi wallet might not be working. But try not to touch a lot of third-party servers. I think that's a pretty big one. There are a lot of things, but even just being mindful of privacy is a big one. And stop saying Bitcoin is private.
I just want to mention to follow the non-technical, but follow Maxwell Brand's YouTube tutorials on how to set up an Electrum personal server, your cold card, and of course, it's not Bitcoin transactions.
Yes.
You use that with Wasabi. It's pretty intuitive after getting used to it. So.
Yeah, no, Max is like incredible. Max is doing a lot of work, he's making a lot of videos, he's helping out. If you go on our Telegram group, you can talk to Max directly, and he'll answer any question anytime in the middle of the night, because that's the kind of day it is. Yeah.
Can you comment on, I guess, what's in between
Samurai.
Oh, I thought no one would ask. That's wonderful. So recently on Twitter, you're not going to believe this. Two people got in an argument where one thought the other one was an idiot. The other one thought the same. So this is big news. There's a little bit of turmoil right now between the Samurai wallet and the Wasabi wallet. Let me just say this. Anyone who works on the Wasabi wallet cares more about privacy than they do about whatever it is, like the title or the roles or money. We love Join Market. Join Market is a competitor. Join Market is not Wasabi. We don't make any money when people use Join Market, and we recommend them all the time. Every time we talk about privacy, we talk about the work of Chris Belcher and Waxwing, Adam Gibson. We reference them all the time. Anyone doing privacy is, in our books, a good person, like essentially our brother or sister in this sort of movement here. Interesting thing with Samurai Wallet is that they don't work on a trustless setup. So when you use the Samurai Wallet on your phone, all your addresses and extended public key is just sent to the Samurai servers. Now, if Samurai is honest, which let's just pretend that they are. They probably are honest, right? It looks like they're pretty dedicated towards privacy. They're not going to reveal that information to anyone else. But unfortunately, it's still a trusted setup. And so a lot of what they were saying online felt disingenuous because felt like there was a different standard, different bar. As well, their Whirlpool CoinJoin only has 5 participants, which we think is really too small. They claim that remixing is free, which it is. The problem is that the numbers don't work out. It allows, on average, every individual to remix 0.7 times, I think, which means the average person can't even remix once. And with an anonymity set of 5, we need to remix like 20 times to get the same amount of anonymity as a Wasabi CoinJoin. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Your UTXO there has .10 something.
Oh, why is it exactly 0.1? Okay, I'm working on it. I've submitted some proposals to make things simpler. There are some complicated trade-offs with doing CoinJoins in terms of how to collect fees from users. It turns out that a more optimal, more ideal way is to have diminishing amounts in the rounds. So instead of having exactly 0.1 every time, you have slightly less every CoinJoin. So you start with 0.105 and then you go slightly less every time. This allows people to remix but still pay a little bit of money, very small, like less than a penny, but they're still paying for the transaction fees of the network. But there are some ideas about getting rid of that to make it even simpler for users. I think it would be much easier for users if it was just 0.1 amounts.
Just a kind of a bit different question, but why is the company located in Gibraltar?
I have no idea. So the founders are all Hungarians. It's located in Gibraltar because I'm sure the legal team thought that was the best jurisdiction to run it. The goal is as long as this is legal, to run it. As soon as it becomes illegal, I probably can't work at the company, but I'm pretty confident Adam will probably continue to operate the thing. But for now, let's just try to keep it legal. This is being live streamed, so I shouldn't.
One thing I know about Gibraltar is they actually have regulation related to cryptocurrency, whereas those countries don't have anything on the books about.
Right, so the idea there maybe is that they know what the rules are more clearly in Gibraltar?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Who here kind of wants to get out of here, walk around? Because I'm good to answer questions in person. In fact, if you would like to leave, go ahead. I'll keep answering questions. Okay. Yes?
What protests did you gather for close to next ending?
Yeah, don't merge coins. Don't merge more than you need to. A good example for a beginner. A big beginner mistake. Use exchanges. I don't use exchanges. I think that the optimal way with Bitcoin is just treat it peer-to-peer. You have friends, you have connections. There are people like Decontrol is a great space for this. If you want to find someone to buy or sell Bitcoin, you can do it without any intermediaries. If you are using exchange, at a minimum, ask for new addresses when you deposit. Right? Even something as small as that is huge, because if you withdraw from an exchange and then mix and then deposit back to the exchange to the same address every time, it's actually completely undoes the anonymity. So that's one example. So post-mix spending, don't merge coins, and when you're sending coins places, try your best to get multiple addresses. If you want to send money to someone, ask for more than one address. If they want if they want half a Bitcoin, ask for 5 addresses or 2 addresses, if they're willing to, and then send in parallel. Parallel send feature is also coming. In particular, send to XML to your own ledger or Trezor device, being able to CoinJoin into it, or being able to directly send all your money in parallel. That's coming as well. Do I know when? I would say something like that is more like 3 months to 6 months, whereas things like Lightning are like a year. It also depends because there's so many people that are joining the project. It's really important to understand that if you want to be a part of the project, you can be a part of the project tomorrow. This month, there was a 1 Bitcoin one Bitcoin bounty for developers. Anyone who made a contribution just got a piece of that 1 Bitcoin. And I think it was like 15 people split up like 1 Bitcoin because the company makes revenue in Bitcoin. It makes, I think, 14 Bitcoin a month. So if people want to contribute, you can. If you want to work for the company, like go, there's so much to do. If you want to just contribute because you love to be a developer, or you want to just make videos or do design, like there's so much room for improvement, and there's money, which is pretty cool, which means you don't have to be a starving artist.
So can you clarify, and apologies if I correct, like so you're gonna mistake, but why is it that you're splitting them into small ones? Is it because there's less people that have a bigger quantity, so you can?
That's a great question. So we have to agree on an equal output denomination, which means that we all have to agree on some amount that we all get the same amount of coin. So you can say, well, what about 0.01? Like we get this question all the time. Make CoinJoins, but for smaller amounts. And the answer is there are trade-offs that don't allow it. We also would like to have larger amounts. So the amount that it is right now, this 0.1, it's just an engineering decision that kind of maximizes trade-offs. Yes.
So this is just loaded on like a notebook or laptop, and that's the software. It's not a phone thing.
Yeah.
Is there a risk? Let's assume the computer is relatively clean, but some people don't know if they pick up a virus or something because it opens up in a browser. Is there a risk at all?
Opens up in a browser?
Well, the software, does it utilize a browser?
No.
Okay.
It's just it's
standalone.
Yeah, it's standalone. Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're using a hardware wallet, you don't have to worry because the security of the wallet.
So let me ask you that then, because that is hardware. For example, Trezor uses a bridge that talks to the browser.
Yes.
So I'm presuming it just creates its own web server internally on the apps, whatever.
That is a question that maybe the desk could answer more specifically. I'm not sure. I also don't use a Trezor, so I would know if I used one, but I don't know.
The idea is that Wasabi, it could talk to a hardware wallet.
I'm pretty confident it talks to the hardware wallet directly because I know it does that for Ledger.
Yeah, you can use the hardware device without using their server.
Yes.
Because you can connect it directly to the card. There is even like the hardware wallet interface right now on the Bitcoin core that allows you to pair your hardware devices directly to the Bitcoin core and use the Bitcoin core wallet as the hardware wallet address.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very cool. Yes?
Yeah, a really basic question. What happens when the total amount being transacted is divisible by 0.1?
Right, so for example, okay, this is a good one. So like, let's say you want to spend 0.25, right? So how many coins do you need? You need 3 coins because there's 0.1 each, right? It's like you want to spend $30 or $25. How many $10 bills do you need? The answer is 3. In that instance, you're going to have change, right, from that transaction. And the question is, well, what about that change that you have? Well, it'll be marked clearly. It'll say it's anonymous, but it is linked to this particular transaction that you did. So at that point, you can, for example, open the Lightning channel, which is what I recommend. You can take that change and then put it in a remix in the future as well, which is what I recommend. But there's imperfections. The fact that amounts aren't hidden makes our job so much harder for these exact reasons. So much harder. Yeah.
If there were confidential transactions you're saying now, then you basically do this without having to worry about the upward amounts of dollars.
Oh yeah.
You just basically be confusing the graph, but there's no value with it.
Yeah. It would be if you just did confidential transactions, I'm pretty sure we would essentially have Monero. If you combine the CoinJoin feature with the confidential transactions, you would have pretty close thing to what Monero has. Monero is quite private. I mean, there are privacy zealots. My favorite is Ian Myers. He says all the work that we're doing is useless because he's a Zcash proponent. He says that we need exponential growth of the anonymity sets, and I kind of believe him. But from my point of view, Bitcoin is the best that we have, and we have to just make it as safe as possible. And privacy is a spectrum. Like if we can get a little bit better, that's what we have to do. I would love, people talk about Grin and Mimblewimble, and they ask me, aren't you excited about Mimblewimble? Beam. And I'm like, yeah, the price is better, but everything else, the infrastructure, the name recognition, the liquidity, the exchanges, the wallets, the hardware wallets, everything else is gone. So you can't make these sort of trade-offs where you just throw out everything just for one thing. So for me, I think we have to push Bitcoin forward for at least another 10 years. Then we'll reevaluate. Okay. Guys, that's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. I'll be here for another half an hour or so and answer your questions. Thank you so much.